Hi, Sam. Hello, everyone. Welcome by a new session from Root Labs at Lunch. Today we have Sam, who's going to speak about infrastructure as code. Very practical session today. I will keep a look at the chat. So if you have any questions, you can already put them in the chat. And then after the session, we can have a Q&A session. Okay. It's up to you, Sam.
Okay. Hi, thanks everyone for joining. So my name is Sam. I'm the lead data ops engineer here at DataRoots, and today I will speak to you a bit about infrastructure as code. So I will briefly introduce the infrastructure as code concept and benefits, but the goal is to keep it short so I can show a demo and like dig into the code. It will be quite technical, so really don't hesitate to ask questions after because I'm trying to pack as much as possible in this short session. So I will start by, okay, what is infrastructure as code? So sorry, long definition. I will let you read it, so I don't have to read it because yeah, it's not PowerPoint best stuff to do. But what I want to put emphasis here is that, as you can see in bold, tool is only a small part of the infrastructure as code. Really, the process, standard, and practice are all equally important. So what are the benefits of infrastructure as code? So first of all, it will give you speed and autonomy. So in the past, before infrastructure as code, there were usually not so much communication between ops and devs, and so it was quite difficult to put stuff in production. So infrastructure as code will allow you to do it by yourself as a development team and be able to deploy your own infrastructure. It will give a better visibility and compliance. So because it's as code, it's easy to look into the difference between one iteration and one other. So you can see what's changed, you can see what's different, and you can approve it or not. So it's really great for teams that needs security requirements and compliance, this kind of stuff, like highly regulated environments. It reduces the risk as well. So not only the risk based on security and compliance, but also the risk of changing stuff. Because you control the change, you know what you want to do, you will see the difference between before and after. So it's easy to be sure that you don't break stuff. And of course, it will give you a better use of the engineers and developers' time, because if you don't have to spend weeks to figure out why release is not working in production, why the infrastructure is not the same in development and in production, you can focus your time where it's the most important, which means developing new features. Of course, there are caveats. Because you do everything as code, because you do everything as an autonomous process, if you mess up, and if you, for instance, want to delete everything, you will really delete everything. So it's not like a single click in your GUI that deletes one server. It's, if you do it badly, you can delete all your servers. So it's really important to put guardrails and be sure that you control your change. Also, the learning curve can be steep. So usually in ops team, you won't find many people who have development knowledge. It's changing, but still, if you go in like big companies, you will find that people don't know how to code. This can be difficult because that means that ops now need to learn a new way of creating their infrastructure. At the same time, devs are not used to architect and to create infrastructure, so it can be also really difficult when they need to start to think about, okay, how can I put my code in production? But of course, infrastructure as code is a DevOps enabler. So I spoke about Dev and Ops, it was on purpose. I won't really dig too much into DevOps today because it could be a talk in itself, but I want to put emphasis on the fact that infrastructure as code is really an enabler for DevOps. So just to put the context, so it's really a movement that wants to promote a collaboration and not a replacement from one or the other team, but a collaboration between development and operation teams. So it's really a shift. And the goal is to remove the silos and to kind of find a way to make those two teams talk. So there is a term called the wall of confusion that explains that development and operations have different views and different goals. Developments want to create new features, to deliver new things, and to go fast. operations, they are responsible for the well-being of the company. They are responsible for the well-being of the infrastructure. So they want stability and they want to be sure that everything will go fine. In the past, it was really difficult, and most of the time what happened is that development threw over the wall a package to production, to operations, and just said, okay, deal with it. I don't know how to run, but you have to do it. That's not really easy, and infrastructure as code is one of the pieces of the puzzle. It brings a common language that, at least for infrastructure, will help the team to talk together. They will know how the development created the package or the application, and it will be possible to deploy that more easily in production. So I stole the image on the right, sorry, on Martin Fowler's website. So as you can see, there are a few parts in this DevOps collaboration framework that can be mapped to infrastructure as code. The fact that you remove the silos, or at least you try to lower the difficulties between those silos, the fact that teams can be autonomous, it's really enabled by infrastructure as code. At the same time, you can put automation for this specific part, and it should bring more quality. Of course, in this graph, there are many other parts like QA, like security. So infrastructure as code is just one piece of the puzzle, but it can really help when teams do not talk together or when a team wants to be independent. So let's go a bit on infrastructure as code tooling. So it's a concept that is quite old. I mean, there are bash scripts forever, but it really took off with Puppet and Chef. So 2005, 2008, big companies started to feel that they could not follow up with the rhythm of change, and tools were needed. So Puppet and Chef for configuration management. So we don't speak yet of infrastructure as code because config management is really about how you will configure your servers. So you have a fleet of servers, you need to configure them, you need to be reproducible, or you need to bring new one easily. This is where Puppet and Chef shines. Unfortunately, it was quite difficult because it necessitated, if we can say that, infrastructure. You need to have master server. You need to install agents on servers. You need to deal with either also the updates of the Puppet or Chef themselves. So it was quite complex, and you will still see that in big companies, but it was really difficult to set it up and to maintain it. So then 2012, Ansible came in. Really loved by developers because suddenly you don't need a master server. You can do it ad hoc on your machine. It's a bit lightweight. It's more procedural, so it's easier as well to create infrastructure. Unfortunately, it's still configuration management and it's still not built for the cloud. So you can handle dynamic inventory, so that means that you can spin up and spin down servers, but still it's not really built for that, but it's really shining at configuration management. 2014, Terraform came in. And I will say that I really like Terraform, so we will do the demo in Terraform. It's built to provision infrastructure for the cloud. Not only the cloud, but it was really designed with that in mind. So that means that you can provision the servers, but also load balancer, also services that are serverless, for instance. So everything that can be deployed with an API can be provisioned by Terraform. So just with this small context in place, let's go to a demo because that's what we want to show today. So you can already go to the website and you will see my extremely good designer skills. Oh, sorry, of course, I had to do that. So this is the demo. Look at that, really nice. Okay, so this is a simple Python container just serving a Flask application. So I'm sorry for the colors. We will change that after. We will try to do some changes and push that in production after. And it's available. You should have access to it. You can see as well that we put the sources on GitHub. So it's not much, but at least you can see exactly everything related to this demo. So let's dig into the architecture. So on purpose, we built multi-cloud, even if the multi-cloud part is only putting the DNS records in Google, but at least we can show that Terraform can interact with multiple cloud providers. So all the infrastructure and the applications are built with Terraform. So everything, the VPC, the internet gateway, everything. But since it can be already quite complex, what we will do is only show you the part where, the part that relates to the application. So the containers, the containers that will be deployed and the public record. So it's currently in staging, and what we want to do after that is promote it to production. The exact same container and the exact same configuration, the only thing that will be different will be how can I say that? Will be the environment variables. That's it. All the rest will be inside, will be the same. Just checking because I see the chat popping up a bit. Okay, no, okay, that's good. Okay, so how does Terraform work? So I created, I don't know why my PowerPoint is not working, but okay. So created animation. I'm sorry, it will be quite ugly, but at least it will show you how Terraform works. So you've got first the TF files. Those are called modules. Basically, multiple TF files will create a module, and it will be a set of configurations to deploy infrastructure resource. So first, Terraform will read those files. Look at the animation skills. It will also read the state file from a bucket. So Terraform is stateful, which means that it will always check what it created before, what is existing, and try to reconcile the state. Then it will output a plan file. So the plan is really the delta between what it sees in the TF files and what is existing in the state, or not existing in the state, or changed, or whatever. It really is the plan of change that it needs to apply, which is really cool because that means that right now, we did not touch anything on infrastructure. We just know what we want to do. So let's say that the state and the plan, everything looks good, perfect, we want to apply it. So then what will happen is that Terraform will read the plan file, will read the state to validate that it did not change in between because it could have been changed by somebody else. And then if it's okay, if everything goes fine, it will deploy the resource in order. That means that if there is a dependency, like here, the database needs to be created before, we will first create the database and then create the other resources. End of the deployment, it writes the new state in the bucket. I say bucket, but you have multiple backend providers. It can be GCS, it's certainly S3, it can be whatever you want. It can be even just a file, but then it's difficult to manage. But basically a central resource where you can store the file. So during this demo, we'll also work with a CI/CD pipeline because it's easier to deploy and everything is set up. So basically what I will do, so we have a master branch. I will create a new branch easily. I will do a few commits. I will do just one commit and then open a pull request. When I open a pull request, a pipeline step will already run and will create a plan. It will validate the structure, the format, etc., and create a plan. Then I will merge, which will deploy the shared part of the infrastructure. So you remember that I said that we won't touch the VPC, we won't touch the buckets and all that. That's the part that will be applied. At the end of the pipeline, it will create a tag. And this tag also has a pipeline that will run and that will deploy the Terraform for the application. So if we do a change in the colors, that's what we'll do just after, this is the part where it will stop. And then at the end of the demo, what I will do is create for the same commit a tag for production that will deploy to production the exact same container and infrastructure, of course. So let's go now to the source. So first, I will talk a bit about kind of structures in Terraform that are important to understand. So you've got the variables. So it's just variables, it's parameters that you can pass to your module. So the module is a set of Terraform file. As you can see on the left here, this is Terraform application, this is a module. So the variables are just the parameters of the module. You have outputs. That's really important because outputs can be considered as like the return values of the module. So either they will be outputted to the console, they can be used between different modules, or they can even be used by a module that will reference what we call a remote state. So you remember we store the state file. This state file can be used by another module, so it can, for instance, target shared resources. That's what we are doing in the demo, and I will show you some examples. So you can also, from a module, call another module, kind of a reusable library, let's say, and it's just referencing either a Git repo, a zip, or even a subfolder. And a last important one is the data source. So in Terraform, if you create a resource, that's what we'll show after, the Terraform module is owner of this resource. So everybody would change it, or if there is a deletion, Terraform will always try to reconcile the state. Data is different. Data is just an import of something existing. Like here, an AMI from AWS that is existing and that you want to find its ID. But it could also be a VPC, a tag, or whatever else. So now what we'll do, is to change quickly, so I can do the demo, a variable in my staging. So you see that I've got two folders here, staging and production. And in staging, I've got some variables. So foreground color, background color. Okay, so let's make it uglier. So I will put it cyan and pink. Okay, so it will be unreadable. So I just changed those variables, and then I will show you how to map them inside the Terraform module. Sorry, and then I will push it. So I will do a commit, make it uglier. I will push. Okay. So right now, if I go in Chrome, I should see that I can create a pull request. I want to create a pull request and go to the actions. Okay. So you can see that I only changed some doc and the colors. I launch it now and then we'll come back later, but it's just that way the pipeline runs while I'm talking. So it will do the plan and it will do the plan for both. So let's go back to the code. So you see that I've got variables, and I will go and show you how it works inside the Terraform. So you see that I create resource, like I said, so those are owned by Terraform, by the module. So for this one, I create a log group, and you can already see that I can put the environment, the variable that is called environment inside the name, which means that it will be really easy to create multiple environments and have all the same resources just with a suffix that will be the environment name. So the log group, okay, not much parameter. Creating a cluster, and I will show you after that the production cluster does not exist yet. And then a task definition. And you will see inside that I reference other objects. So for instance, here I create CloudWatch log group with Root Labs AIC. And here I say, okay, you have to target the CloudWatch log group with Root Labs AIC. Does not look really that much, but it's really important because that means that now Terraform knows there is a dependency between those two. So if he needs to create this task, first he needs to create this log group. That means that it's easier than if you create a script because you don't have to worry about ordering. You can do it based on resource type, and you group them logically. Everything could be in a single file, but as you can see on the left, I try to divide them between logical entities. So here I create a task which will just be the container definition, and then I create some objects for a load balancer. And as you can see, every time there are suffixes for the environment. As you can see here, I can reference the remote state. So you see remote state and use its output to get the VPC ID. I will go after to show you the main file. So let's go see what happens. Okay, so all check passed, and I will show the plan. So as you can see here, Terraform will do some stuff. So he will have to change I will probably try to zoom a bit because it will be unreadable. So as you can see here, what does it do? It says that the task definition has to be changed. Task definition here must be replaced because we changed the parameters and it's immutable, so you cannot edit it. He has to delete and create a new one. And as you can see, what will happen is that we'll add one, the new task, we'll change one, the cluster, and we'll destroy one, the old task. Okay, so let's say that we want to do that. I will merge myself. It's not good practice, but I'm working alone on this, so don't have reviewers. And now what will happen is that the pipeline will run. You can go in actions and you can see that it's starting to run. Okay, let's go back to Terraform. So I will go into the main file and show you how you can connect to different cloud providers. So as you can see here, we've got provider Google and provider AWS. You can parameterize everything. For instance, here I say that the project is Dataroot DNS, but you can add the regions, you can add meetings. What you can see as well, or cannot see, are credentials, because they are coming from environment variables. That way, you can commit it safely to your Git repository. You don't have to worry about leaking credentials and things like that. Terraform is the block that will define where you store your state. So it says, okay, my state is in S3. You put the bucket, you put the region, and you put a log table with DynamoDB. So basically, that means that if you start to run a new plan, it will check first that nobody is running at the same time. So it will just be a log. And as you can see, there is also the remote state. So somewhere in this specific file, there is the remote state for the shared. So here, there is no key for the state file because you can split it by environment and put it in a different file here in backend. You see that here it's Rootlab AIC production and here it's staging. That way, when you run the plan, you can say, don't target a single one because then you would have issues every time you would deploy to a new environment. It would try to destroy the previous one and create a new one. So we want to split it. And this is why I have those specific files. So let's go back to see what's happening here. So the Terraform for the shared was applied. So as you can see, I've got first a step when I do an init, just to say where are the providers, how to find the backend. So the first part I showed into the graph before. And then there's an apply. And if you look at the apply, nothing changed because I did not touch. And as you can see here, I've got all the outputs I talked about before. So the VPC ID, the different subnets I can target, security group for the egress, the repository. Those are the ones that can be reused then by the child module. Then it builds the Docker image. And now it's creating the tag. So like I said before, when there is a tag, there will be a new pipeline just for the Terraform deployment. So you can see now that it's working and it will deploy the change inside Terraform, with Terraform inside staging. So we will have to wait a few seconds and then we will be able to see changing into Amazon console. So I will go in the console right now. So you can see that I've got just a cluster with 3 running tasks. And those tasks have the ID number 2. So now he's applying it. So Terraform is running, he's applying the change. Okay, he's not wanting me to, GitHub does not want me to see it, but that's okay. If I refresh here, we'll see soon, you see, tasks now are inactive because it's starting to do a rollout of a new version of the service. So if we look at the staging right now, we should see that the task now that is targeting, okay, it's taking some time. Okay, it's taking some time. You see task definition, Rootlab's AIC staging 3. So it's taking some time because he has now to pull the container to start it, but soon we'll be able to see the container running with the new version. So to not lose too much time, I will already create the tag to deploy to production, because right now if you go to production, so you see it's AIC, so it's the same as before, just without staging. I will create a release. That way I can push the latest change I did in production. So draft a new release. I will target the most recent commit and publish the release. So if we go now, for instance, in the load balancer, you see that we don't have a target group for production. And we don't have any rules allowing, okay, I have to refresh. We don't have any rules that allows, that will direct to production. So let's go now and see if we finished the deployment. So he has 6 running tasks. Those are running. So if I go now and everything goes fine, okay, you see it's pink and cyan. It's even uglier than before, but yeah, okay. And right now, what's happening is that he promoted the Docker image. So the production pipeline just tagged the Docker image with the production version and is deploying now to Terraform with Terraform in production. So we should see some stuff appearing. Right now, we see that we have a rule for the load balancer. We should have a new target group coming. And so soon, we should see it running. Okay, of course, now the containers are not really present. So I will have to go in the cluster and see what's happening. So the tasks are pending. So you can see that now it's starting to provision the cluster. So we'll go back. I'll go back now to the PowerPoint where it's running. So yeah, demo time. So as you can see, there are some benefits for Terraform. First, you declare the syntax with a declarative approach. So you don't have to start to order them. You don't have to worry about this needs to be created before. You don't care because Terraform does it for you. Then you can have a separation of the plans and apply phases. So during the plan, you will only see what should be applied, and then only after an approval, you can deploy it for production or any other environment. You have many providers. So I just showed AWS and Google, but you can find them. You can have, there is a list on the website. You can find them for tier 2 cloud provider like Scaleway, OVH, or DigitalOcean, platforms such as Kubernetes, OpenStack, but also databases, queues, even automation tools. You can find them for SSO configuration like Auth0 or Okta. So what's really cool with that is that you can deploy your full infrastructure, even a complex infrastructure with many dependencies in a single tool. It's stateful, and it will be able to correct the drift. So if you say I want 15 virtual machines, and somebody creates like 17 out of the same auto-scaling group, for instance, then Terraform will start to go back to what was decided before. If you delete something, it will recreate it. So that way, you can avoid people destroying stuff by mistake. I mean, they will destroy, but you have an easy way to correct it. If you don't use Terraform right now and you want to start to use it, it's also possible to define your current architecture and import it in a state. So that way, the next stage, the next state will be, let's say, close to what you have in production or even what you have in production. It's extensible via modules, so you can publish your modules. For instance, let's say you have something creating a VPC with an internet gateway, with like a bootstrap of an environment. You can publish that or even just use it for yourself. Create or put inside a few variables and reuse it. That's something that, for instance, we are doing right now at DataRoots. We are creating a kind of Helm replacement for Kubernetes in Terraform. If it's not enough, or you don't find what you need, like you have a provider with a custom API, there is no way of using that with Terraform, you can even write your own provider. It's in Golang. There is an SDK. It's quite easy to use. And so, for instance, you can create something for even your own internal tooling. And what's really cool is that there is a huge community. If you look on Reddit or Medium or whatever, you will find like dozens and dozens of posts about Terraform. Also, there is a huge support from vendors. For instance, AWS has its own infrastructure as code tool called CloudFormation. It's quite common to see a support in Terraform before it is in CloudFormation because they work hand in hand with Terraform. If you want to learn more about Terraform, you can go to the Learn page of HashiCorp. There are like tutorials and many things that will help you to bootstrap. For infrastructure as code, there is a great book by Keith Morris. He's the guy working at ThoughtWorks. So it's home of Martin Fowler or Jason Bull for those who know them. It's not really about tools. I mean, he speaks about tools, but it's more about the practice and how to transition from, like, let's say, legacy way of doing things to infrastructure as code. 12-factor apps is a framework from Heroku to build SaaS application. It's not directly related, but some stuff that they speak about, that they talk about, like configuration environment, dev and prod parity, or easy reusable components, really apply and are really helped by infrastructure as code. You can do it without, but it's really great to have infrastructure as code. It will really help you on that. And then there is a comparison of different tools. So it's from Gruntwork. They create a lot of Terraform modules, and they explain why they chose to use Terraform and not Puppet and Ansible. It's not to say that those are not good. I mean, for instance, I use Terraform with Ansible when I have to do complex things on server, but they explain really all the advantages. So let's go now, just before the end of the talk, to see in production if something's happening. excellent. It's there, it's in production, it's, yeah, no, it's really bland. Huh? So let's try to say hello to somebody. So hello, Root Labs. Okay, but the most important is to say hello to Rick. And that way, I could recall all of you in my talk. So thanks a lot. Now you can go build stuff.
Okay, thank you, Sam. I'm just looking at the chat. We have a question here from, I think, Ivan. Are you able to see the chat, Sam?
I'm looking into that, but I will. Yes, okay, I see it. Okay, oof, yes, it's a big question. Okay, so the question is, do you manage secret with Terraform too? Yes and no. So what you would want to do is to have a secrets management outside of Terraform, because you don't want to commit things in your Git repositories. But for instance, Vault, which is also done by HashiCorp, or secrets management, parameter store from AWS, or Key Vault from Azure, for instance, can store your secrets for you, and then you can reference them as data. So you would create them outside of Terraform, or you auto-generate them in Terraform, but the idea is not to store them inside your Terraform. And then one thing I did not speak about is that the state file contains all the values unencrypted. So you definitely don't want to store them in VCS, because if you commit them and you've got a password inside, it won't be shown anywhere, but still Terraform needs to be able to see if there is a difference. And so you'll store it in plain text. So what you want to do is to store them inside an encrypted bucket or in Consul or whatever, but really not inside your VCS. And then generated blast for tracing. So for the tracing, auditing, and for forensic, it really depends on the company. Most of the time, the plans, you use them to be sure that what you want to deploy does not break like guidelines or security requirements. And if you work in a DevOps mode, most of the time what you want to do is to also include the security. So they can review as well before something goes to production, that you are not opening to the whole world, for instance, your load balancer or whatever else. That's what I did here. It's for the whole world. So if I had a security team, they would have shut me down. But anyway, for the demo.
Okay. I think that's it for the questions, Sam. So I will post a link in the meetups. It's also on our YouTube channel, the link to the recording of today's session. And thank you, Sam, for hosting this session. It's really interesting, infrastructure as code. And thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much.
Bye.